Good afternoon. Welcome to today's webinar event. It is promptly noon Eastern Time, at least here it is for me. Before we get started here, welcome to everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Our final webinar this week on accounting reports. My name is Joshua, and I'm going to be your presenter. Before we get started, a few technical things. Please forgive me if you've attended before and heard this. We'll try to make it as quick as we can. Click the little red arrow at the sidebar of your webinar control panel. Allows you to minimize that control panel, get it out of the way. Particularly important on a single monitor setup. Or if you've got a dual monitors, you can just drag that off to your second desktop just to get it out of the way. We're going to be here together for about the next 20 minutes or so. Again, talking about accounting internal reports. If you've seen what you came to see at any point, you can, of course, click File, exit, leave webinar anytime. Thank you so much for attending in advance. If you have questions, please type those into the questions portion of the webinar control panel for me. I'll do my best to keep an eye on those. If I'm unable to answer them during the webinar event, I will definitely be able to stick around and get those answered at the end. Please keep your questions to the topic at hand, if possible. About webinar or accounting reporting, and again, I may not be able to answer your questions. I may have to ask you to call us through support. Just may not have enough information about your particular database setup, what have you, in order to be able to answer your question. Not because I don't want to. I generally can't, because there's just more information that's needed. We are recording today's webinar event. It will be out on our support center on the Church Windows website here within the next week or two. So you can always go back and revisit this topic. I always recommend to folks in the meantime, there's probably another webinar that we've done previously recorded on an earlier version on the same topic. You may be able to find that sooner or quicker, but this one will be out there eventually. Okay. Finally, the topic for today's webinar is taken from A201, Accounting 201 workbook, pages 26 and 27. It's not terribly much in terms of the workbook information. It just points out where some of the other reports can be found. We're going to talk in more detail on some of these reports here, these internal reports that we think are important, of course. All right, so as we open accounting, yesterday's, we talked about kind of reporting conventions and formatting. On Wednesday, yesterday, we talked about the big three: balance sheets, treasurer's report, and fund activity report. Today we're going to kind of touch upon some of the other reports in accounting. Maybe perhaps, not they're just as important as others. They're just maybe ones that are more used for, troubleshooting issues, internal, investigations, more detailed reports. But again, no less important. They're just not ones maybe that we distribute to our committees. They're more of us as the everyday user that we'll use for things. Okay. Again, as indicated, we're either going to access the reports through the reports menu at the top, or list at the top, or through our reports icon in the middle. But the first one we talk about here is under reports and export, worksheets, and summary of cash activity. So this literally is as described. It is a summary of the cash activity or our asset, a particular asset account. So as the workbook page describes, it prints the beginning balance for an asset, lists each categorized transaction. So let's go ahead and choose, say, our Huntington Bank checking, accounting year 2018. We're going to actually backdate this to January, and we're going to look just at the month of January. You can run it virtually for any date range you wish, but generally the month is most helpful. And then we're simply going to click Print. Unlike other reports, this is one of those reports that serves a very specific purpose, reports on very specific information, and therefore there aren't really any column controls on it. There isn't much information we can add to it or take away because, again, it is set up and designed to report on something very specific. So let me see if I can't zoom in just a little bit. I think everybody can see that okay. But, as we can see, it shows our Huntington Bank checking account, our cash balance as of 1/1/2018 at the beginning of the day. I think that's very important. And then it shows our added transactions. So in this case, credit income, credit donations, debit transfers, journal entries, and accounts receivable collections. Then the total additions, okay, and then our subtractions. So it would be payments, payroll, transfer credit, journal entry credit, and then total subtractions, and then our ending balance for that account at the end of the day, okay? This is a very important report. I think it is, personally, okay? One of the nice things about this is, and this is one of the very few reports we can in accounting, and I like to point this out, is that we don't have to run it for a date range. I can run it for a specific day if I want. And why this becomes important is because, if you're entering, a lot of donations and a lot of bills and payments all on the same day, this will help you understand whether you've affected your cash account correctly. And how that really carries through for you in your thinking is that viewing this on a per entry date basis could help minimize your any bank reconciliation issues you have. I know from personal experience that in users that print out and use this summary of cash activity printed out at the end of the day when they are posting a lot of transactions, generally tend to have fewer bank reconciliation issues. Just sharing my experience with you about it, okay? So, because again, it clearly describes here, if I go back and go, okay, well, I'm not sure what dates I posted these, but, if I know I've got some giving posted on some of these days, like if I choose January 14th through January 14th, it shows, here's my donations, there's my deposit, that's either going to check out, that's from donations clearly. If I check my deposit slip, look at my bank rec, what have you, my bank statement, it's either going to correspond with that total or it's not, okay? But if I ran that for a specific date of transactions, it would show all of the transaction types that were posted with a total of summary of those transaction types for the day, showing their effect on the asset and show the adjusted account balance, okay? Very, very important report. One that I think is frequently underused. One that's a little more common, and we kind of hear mixed emotions about this one, is the check register. So if we go to reports, again, transaction, and choose check register, again, I can choose to run it for a specific date if I want. I can run it. It's going to be, again, a range of dates by default, but if I want to run it for a particular, date, one day, I can certainly do that, okay? So let me go ahead in here and enter, let's say, January 31st. Again, choosing a particular asset. I do have some column control here, okay, where I can add or omit some certain columns and then click print. But this is literally just a register of checks, payments with check numbers that I've posted from the software, okay? Listing of checks that have been entered into church windows, okay? A lot of folks kind of have expressed some frustration about this report for us because they want to see deposits on this report, okay? But it is simply a list of checks only. That's it. This will not include deposits of any kind, okay? It's just a list of checks and their void status or active status as the case may be, okay? So then once we move past those voided transactions, then we begin to see real transactions in the system. Okay? Again, check register, fairly straightforward. Again, you can add certain like cleared status on those over to the available visible columns if you wish. But by default, it defaults to date, check number, amount, vendor payee comments. All right, some of the other accounting reports, we'll try to get into a little more detail on some of these, can be found on the page 27 of our workbook page there. Talk about, other reports like our deposit slip, general ledger, transaction journal, accounts payable, trial balance, budget report. There's not enough time here in this session today to cover all of these, so I'm going to pick a couple that, that I feel are important here. I mean, at least from my perspective as a Church Windows trainer and technician that supports you, ones that I find particularly helpful in terms of troubleshooting problems. deposit slip, that's one that basically, will just one that shows your deposits. It shows, your checks and your cash, and can include our, one of the things that I'm going to say about this report is, this is little known fact, is that folks go, oh, well, I give my other income or deposits that aren't considered donations to my donations people to record them because I want them to include them on the deposit slip. Well, folks, what I'd like to remind you is right down here at the bottom left of our deposit slip, notice this, I have two check boxes, include accounting entries and include donation entries. So if I post them with the same date as my donations, okay, and I then simply give them this deposit slip after the donations are recorded to my donations or whomever is making the deposit at the bank, check that box, it's going to bring in all my deposits, including my enter income transactions in accounting, and combine those with, or add those in on the deposit slip with my regular donation entries. So I don't have to record my donation transactions, my income through donations, in order to include them on the deposit slip in Church Windows, okay? Because I can include both the accounting entries and donation entries, provided they share the same date, okay? So just FYI. The other two reports that I find that are most important are things like our general ledger or our transaction journal. General ledger, these are the two most detailed reports in Church Windows. This is why we don't distribute these, is many times committee members, committee folks, boards, trustees, whomever, they don't care about the transactions, they're more interested in totals. Okay? But if I want to run a particularly detailed transaction or report about a particular account, I'm generally going to use my general ledger or my transaction journal. Okay? I can even run this for a specific fund. I do occasionally get the call from somebody who says, "Hey Josh, I have a committee for a particular group of folks who want to see the exact transactions that we've posted through their fund or in and out of their fund." And I can do that. So if I go, okay, I'm choosing my building fund balance, and I choose either for month or year to date, so we're going to run it for year to date. I mean, we might choose it for a more specific month, for a monthly report. I'm not sure what the activity shows in here, so I'm going to be a little more general about this. But then, again, I would visit my columns tab, what have you, and click print, and this is going to show me all of the transactions that occurred in my building fund account. So it clearly shows. Here was the beginning balance. Here's the building fund contributions. I don't have any expense transactions. I can include those if I want to include accounts with no activity. Yep, so down here it shows the other additional accounts that are linked to this fund, but there are no transactions or activity in those other accounts. If there were, those would be listed or shown on this report too. But it will show exactly what transactions were posted and affected their particular accounts. Okay? Folks, when you call me and ask me and tell me that you've got a trouble or having questions about a particular account, this is one of the first reports as your Church Windows technician that I'm going to suggest that you run. Okay? Because it does particularly, allow us to, so let's maybe do that. So let's choose a particular account. So let's choose like a telephone expense or something. Telephone. And again, run it for year to date. It shows me all of the bills and payments and all of my transactions in that account for the desired or requested period. Okay? I can even ask it to include reverse transactions right here in the middle if I wish. If, I want to see if something was entered and later reversed, I can certainly do that. Okay? You have this again combined with the transaction journal are two of the most detailed reports that we have in the software. Okay? The other thing is this one does also have a running balance column. So if I click print here, it shows what my beginning balance for the account was, whether it's for the month or the year. Of course, my expenses and income don't have beginning balances. Shows the amount of each transaction, its effect on the account balance, and then the ending balance of that account for, again, the year or the month. This report, folks, will frequently help me resolve issues with you 90% of the time. Okay? Again, you do have some column control, so you can add or certain columns to the report if you wish and take away those that you don't. Okay? But again, when it comes down to troubleshooting accounts, questions about accounts, balances, what have you, the general ledger is going to be one of the first reports we would recommend you run. Second, or finally, if we go to our transaction journal, and this is one of the things I like to mention too, is if we go into the chart of accounts itself under Manage Accounts, and you click on a particular account, let's say I go down to Accounts Payable, I go, okay, I want to look at my American Electric Power account. If I click Print over here on the right, notice it opens up my general ledger options with whatever account I've selected, pre-selected there. I can just choose month or year to date, click Print, and there's my activity for that account. Very fast and very simple. All right. So finally, with about a few minutes left here, we're going to go back up to Transactions and Transaction Journal. Again, a very helpful report when I've got questions about, different parts of transactions. This is basically the same information that I'd be asking for if I were going to, like my browse transactions. If I go to Transactions and Browse, up to Filter and Sort, it essentially opens this same window. This screen basically allows me to filter out information that I don't want to see on my particular transaction journal. Do I want to look at a particular, say, an account? So I can, including my vendors. I can click in here and choose an account or a fund. I can even research and investigate information as it pertains to a particular user and what they've entered or changed in accounting. Do I want to search for a specific check number or reference number? Is there a particular date range that I want to look for the transactions for? Or was I sitting at the computer when certain transactions were posted? How that comes into play, and I mentioned this a lot, is I actually did it with folks as recently as today, where, rather than printing, all of my reports after I post a series of transactions, I can just wait and print out all of my transactions at the end of the day if I want, just by coming in here and entering the date posted. Date posted is a date that you have no control over. That's a date that the Church Windows assigns to it based on the date that we are sitting at the computer. Here I'm pointing down to that in the bottom right. So, because any transactions I post on March 16th are posted today, it's going to assign a date posted of 3/16. So I can just go in and run my transaction journal and just say 3/16 through 3/16, and it will just print all of the transactions I posted today. Very much more printer friendly, frankly. Okay. Do I want to look for a specific transaction number or a range of transaction numbers? Are there transactions of a specific dollar amount? Folks, you can combine these criteria. This is one of the most helpful here is transaction types. I'm looking for specific transaction types that occurred within a specific date range and maybe affected a specific account. So I can go, I want to look for my transactions that were in January of 2018, and I want to clear all, and I want to check just my bills, and I want to look at those bills. Or I want to look at my payment transactions that affected my main checking account, and click Print. There they are. 4 payments that I posted in the month of January in one simple report, quick and easy to find. Okay. I can even go so far as to go down here and say show other details in transaction. So in this case, I've requested my payments. I want to see what those payments, what vendor was debited. Show other detail in transactions. Click Print. He said, clicking Print. Sorry, it's not sure why it's taken this long to generate this. Let's try this again. May want to visit our columns tab here, but it should be there. But there it is. So right here, it shows my payment was, crediting my Huntington Bank checking, but in this case was Ameritech, Columbia Gas, AEP. Those were all the vendors that were paid that I made those checks payable to. Okay? Folks, you can enter a whole lot of criteria here to filter out transactions you don't want to see, finding and searching only those you do. using these, transaction journal or the general ledger reports. Okay? Again, we want you to gain a little confidence in terms of what it is, going around and exploring and seeing, looking at some of these reports and kind of playing with them until you kind of feel comfortable understanding you can change things and move things around and add and take away columns until you feel comfortable. In knowing that you can go in and just change the entire layout of a report and realize you're not breaking anything. Okay? All right, so it's 20 minutes after. That's all we're going to talk about that. Let me see what questions we've got here. If you have questions, please type those in to me. Sometimes I post a journal entry and accidentally forget to print it out, for example, payroll from our outside company. If I try to print it off later, it shows up on 3 pages and almost impossible to read. Is there a way to print off a journal entry or other transaction where it's condensed and neat in the original journal entry? Yeah, well, Crystal, that's, again, we'd probably be going up to transaction journal again. Requesting date posted, maybe even specific journal entry, clearing journal, choosing just journals. And again, visiting your columns tab, to limit it down to maybe having one of your other previous transaction posting reports handy so you know exactly what columns they are and in what order you can adjust here for the transaction journal. Maybe you might need to adjust your column width. But again, you can always go save selections as default down here in the bottom left and, save those selections, those columns that you've selected in the column widths. Sure, should be able to get something really close, if not exactly, to what you had before. Good question. All right, what else we got here? Is it possible to get all of those columns on one page instead of 3 for the transaction journal? That, Crystal, I don't know how to answer that for you. I'm sorry. You probably could. But again, you'd be probably kind of, you'd have to be pulling down these column widths. Things like account name would offer you the most flexibility to change it down to, reducing that column name down. That would certainly give you more real estate on one page, certainly. But it's an awful lot of information. It may not be exact, but yeah, certainly explore it, see what you can create. By using the filter in transaction report and entering an account, am I asking to see that account, or am I saying I don't want to see that account? Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, so anything that I'm asking for here, like when I'm putting an account in here, I'm asking that I want to see that account exclusively. Good question. Yeah, and basically whenever I'm entering anything in here, Diane, I'm saying I want to see those things that exclusively to meet that combination of criteria. Again, folks, you can enter a whole slew of like one of the ones that I do a lot of times on my support calls is, folks say, hey, I've got this list of bills with 0 account balances that need to be marked as paid. I come in here, I clear all, I check bills, I uncheck show paid, and click print. There's my list of my bills that are not marked as paid that are not marked as paid, whether they have balance or not. Letting the system do some work for us. Can you save frequently used transaction journal requests? Yeah, there's not an option to save criteria, Pam, really. I mean, I don't think if I do maybe if I do save selections as default and click print, it might remember it. There are no records to show. Let me change that. Let's do bills. Click print with that. It should be trying to save it here. Let's get rid of that preview here. For some reason it's not coming up. What I was really wanting to see was if it's going to save those. I think it does save those checkboxes. So if I close out, go back to transactions, transaction journal. Yeah, it saved just my bills. It won't save accounts. It won't save dates. But it will save transaction type or checkboxes here for these. Yeah. But that's it. That's the extent of it. It won't save date ranges or accounts or things like that, at least to the best of my knowledge. It's a good question. All right. Well, I'm not seeing any other questions coming in here. I'll go ahead and end the webinar for everybody. Again, keep an eye out for this video if you want to revisit it again on our website. If you have questions, of course, please don't hesitate to contact our support staff. we're happy and here to help. We're here till 5 p.m. Eastern time today. If by all means, please give us a holler. Other than that, we'll be back in on Monday after 9 a.m. next week. All right. Thank you all. Talk to you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.